Happy Tuesday, y'all. I am super excited for tonight's live because we are talking about VBACs, and I am going to be going live with one of my favorite people. Also, if y'all have followed any of my posts, you've probably seen or followed her already, but Serenity Life Doula. She is like one of my favorite people, and we're going to be talking all about VBACs tonight. If y'all don't know what a VBAC is, it is a vaginal birth after cesarean, and we're going to talk a lot about the myths tonight of what a lot of people might think about VBACs versus what's actually true what's actually true about VBACs. So she's going to come in right now so we can just jump right into this conversation. Let me see. Hopefully this doesn't take forever because every single time I try to go live with somebody, it always acts like there is some technical difficulties. So she should be joining now. But if you have had a C-section and you know you want kids in the future, this is going to be a great conversation for you. If you are in the process of wanting to go for a VBAC, this is also going to be a great conversation for you because it's going to really help it's going to really help you guys kind of evaluate and kind of hopefully get your minds in a much better place for your birth. So anywho, do you want to introduce yourself so you can just let everybody know who you are? I kind of did a brief introduction, but you can do a good intro of you. I've already kind of talked a little bit about you.
Okay. Hi, beautiful.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So I'm Doula Krisha. I'm Serenity Life Doula. I'm a certified birth doula, childbirth educator, lactation educator, belly binding specialist. I also educate about essential oils, and I'm a natural birth trainer. I guess my passion lies with first-time moms and women with the heart of an athlete who desire a home or birth center birthing experience. And VBACs are considered, first-time moms if their very first birth happened to be a cesarean. So they fall into that first-time mom birthing category, actually having a baby. And I really enjoy preparing families for birth through physical and basically mental mindset training exercises and conditioning their body for that one birthing game day when they meet their little one. Yes. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. And I'm the one that does all the pregnancy reels.
I know. If y'all don't follow her, make sure that you do. She actually is the reason and has been kind of my model as to why I do what I do now. From childbirth education to now turned doula, I guess, added doula to the resume because of what she does and how she does it. And so I think it's so important. Yes, thank you. I think it's so important that y'all just really take this information. If this is something that you're going for, take this information because you have two people here, one who has done this for a very long time and knows and has seen many VBACs happen, and then another person who's actually experienced it. So this is going to be a really great conversation for you to just get a lot of knowledge and encouragement and hopefully inspiration to know that this is possible for you. So we're going to talk a lot about myths tonight. If y'all didn't see my reel earlier, we're going to be jumping into those myths about VBACs, and we're just going to have a conversation. So if y'all have questions throughout the live, put them in the comments so we can kind of answer them as they come up. Or if you're going for a VBAC, let us know so we can just celebrate you because this is a big decision. And I'm sure for some of y'all, that you can experience a lot of pushback because of going for something that is so taboo in our birth world. And so we just want to celebrate you, but nonetheless, we'll just jump in. So if y'all don't know my birth story, I have two kids. In my last birth, I was going for a VBAC, and my first birth ended in an emergency C-section. And I knew from the jump that I wanted to have more kids. And so I knew at that point I did not want to go through that experience again. A vaginal birth after cesarean is what VBAC stands for, meaning you are going to try to have a baby vaginally after you've had a cesarean. And so I knew that that was what I wanted. I didn't exactly know how that was going to happen, but I knew that was what I wanted because I had such a traumatic experience with my C-section. And so I began doing a lot of research and talking to people, my postpartum doula who I had at the time, to really understand that it was possible. And so one of the first things that I did was hired my healthcare provider and my doula. And so that was kind of where this whole journey started. And so before and this is going to be a 2-part series, by the way. So before we jump into like how to choose your birth team and all those things, we're going to go through some of the myths. And these are some of the things that I was worried about when I started on this journey of a VBAC. So the first one that is a myth that a lot of us hear about is that once a C-section, always a C-section.
So is that your main concern? Was that your main
Honestly, that
concern?
wasn't my main concern.
Okay.
That was not my main concern at first because I just knew I didn't want to go through that again. And I didn't really know much about VBAC, but once I got into the community of like C-section moms, I knew that it didn't have to be that way all the time. So I knew that wasn't the case. But then once I started to get into the birth world, I heard so much different, if that makes sense. So once I started to educate moms and once I started to work on becoming a doula, I started to see so many more moms be like, oh, wait, you can do that? Or once I started to share my story, oh, wait, I can do that? And I was like, yeah, like what's going on? Who's talking to you? So that was what was so frustrating once I started to educate myself, because that's not actually true. And have you heard that from some of the moms that you've worked with? I mean, obviously they reached out to you because they wanted a VBAC, but for some people who, you've seen or talked to who've had C-sections, have you heard that same kind of sentiment or, just opinion?
Yes, I've heard people just automatically think once they have a cesarean, always a cesarean. And that really depends on basically who their healthcare provider, we're going to talk more about that next week, on whether that person feels competent or incompetent enough to actually deliver vaginally after cesarean. That has a lot to do with it. But also just a lot of moms that have had cesareans, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to have to experience that again because of the difficult recovery. It's a major abdominal surgery. I mean, it's major abdominal. It's classified as major abdominal. And you have some recovery to do. Plus, you have a newborn baby to take care of. So it's a lot of moms don't want to have to do that again. And they want to find people who will support them and help them get through that without possibly having to do that. Now, there will be some moms that will have to have a repeat cesarean based on maybe medical records or something else that's going on. But I think there's way more moms that are actually eligible for VBAC based on what their medical records state.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to call out because truly and honestly, if you look at the research, multiple repeat cesareans are actually more of a risk of infection and things of that nature to our bodies versus a VBAC. And I think that's kind of like this misconception where it's like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this because of my uterus and because of rupturing and because of all these other things. When in reality, like you just had a major, like you said, a major abdominal surgery that went through 7 layers of muscle and everything else. And it's like, you want to cut that open again after it had to heal over. You have scar tissue, you have all these other things. And that's actually like to cut through that again and then make it heal over what it's already been healed. Like that is actually, statistics and research show that that's actually more of a risk for our bodies in the healing process than actually trying to go for a VBAC or a vaginal birth after a cesarean. So I think that that's also something that a lot of moms just don't know about and they don't think about because we don't, when you're going through a cesarean, you don't see what's going on down there. You just know I got cut open, I got sutures, I got, stitched up, and I got to go through this healing process, but I don't really know, or I can't see what's going on down there. So you don't know the major, incision that you actually have. And then I think sometimes too, like what I have heard when it's like once a cesarean, always cesarean from the mindset perspective is that sometimes people like to just know. And so for some of those repeats, they end up being scheduled, like scheduled repeats. And they're like, oh, I know when I'm going to have my baby. And for some people
That's
that
true.
gives them peace of mind,
Yeah.
but, and for everyone it's different. But I think like with a VBAC, you have to realize that like Krisha said, this is going to be like you're a first time mom, because you're
Okay.
going to be treated like a first time mom because you have never had a vaginal birth. And so that can be difficult for some people because there's just the unknown, I guess, after you've already had a baby. But truly and
Yes.
honestly, like, you should feel comfortable almost, because people are going to treat you like this has never happened for you before. And that means you get the opportunity to be educated from ground zero.
Yeah.
So it
I
just
think
depends on who you're, yeah.
that weighs heavily on some moms too, like
Mm-hmm.
mindset mentally wise, because you're
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, you've already had a baby, you're not a first time mom, but your
Yeah.
body actually going through the process, dilating the 10 centimeters and pushing a
Yeah.
baby out across the finish line has not happened yet. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes that can play a little bit of a mindset trick on some
Mm-hmm.
moms as well.
Yeah.
Back to I liked your point about research. So there are like some amazing VBAC
Yeah.
research opportunities out there, like VBAC Link, VBAC
Mm-hmm.
Facts. So there are things or places you can go look at some of these things, like myths we're talking about, and
Yeah.
why they're not, well, why they shouldn't be myths.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So one of the things we kind of already talked about this, but it'll lead into the next myth that I shared earlier, which is C-sections are easier. And speaking from experience, it's not. And I also want to just share for any person on here who has had a C-section, it is not or people who haven't, it is not an easy way out. And I think there is this, in the birthing world, not even just from a professional's perspective, but just from like a motherhood perspective,
Mm-hmm.
people, we have this like comparative culture where we want to like feel like we have a one up if we had one type of birth over the next. And the reality is, like, C-sections are just not, they're not truly they're not an easy way out. They're not a shorter way to birth a baby. It's actually more difficult, truly and honestly, because the recovery is so much harder for a cesarean versus a vaginal birth, which is encouraging if you do want to go for a VBAC, because your recovery is shorter and easier versus where you're having a C-section and you do have to be truly on bed rest for a lot longer. And you do have a major incision and you do have a lot of things that you have to deal with that you have because you had this major surgery. And like Krisha said earlier, and you have a baby. So you're still breastfeeding, but now you're like, your baby is kind of sitting on that incision sometimes, or how you sit and how you lay is much more challenging. So I think that there is a myth that like me going and getting another C-section might be easier than going and getting a VBAC. A VBAC might be harder on my body or something like that, but it's
Mm-hmm.
truly and honestly not. Speaking from, like I said, my own experience, when I had our daughter, which was in March, I was tired, physically tired, but like I felt like myself again very, very fast. And I was like, I want to do this again. And I mean, like, the birth was so amazing for me. It wasn't that it wasn't challenging, but it was so amazing and it made me feel so good afterwards. Whereas, like, with a C-section, I just felt kind of loopy and I couldn't walk for a little bit because I had an epidural and all these things that you just have to, all the medicine that has to wear off of your body, that it's truly and honestly not an easier way out. So if you, like I said, if you are trying to go for a VBAC, understand that that is a myth. And if you prepare your body the right way and you're going for a natural birth, your healing process is a lot faster, especially if you allow your body to heal properly. I don't know if you've seen that with some of your VBAC mamas, but maybe you can share on that from a doula perspective.
Yes, the preparation's important. I think we're going to talk about that more next week. But
Mm-hmm.
preparing your body for VBAC, but knowing that you want to go after that is strong. Like, you have to be pretty determined. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to find the right support. I'm going to prepare for it. Make sure my body's ready to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I've had multiple VBAC1s, which is first baby was cesarean, second baby was natural. vaginally, but I've also recently had a VBAC 3. So that means that's another myth that you can have 2, 3 cesareans and not have vaginal birth. Well, this February, I had a VBAC 3, all natural. So that means she had 3 cesareans and then had a vaginal birth. It was actually natural. So it is possible. It is possible. May not be possible for every single VBAC mom, but it is, I think it is more possible than what we're leading on to being possible for, right?
And so, that was actually one of the myths. So it's actually great that you led right into that. You don't have to, even if you've had 2 cesareans, even if you went for a VBAC and you had to end up getting another cesarean for, medical purposes, it doesn't mean that you can't try for another VBAC again. What we are going to talk about next week is just like Krisha said, is the healthcare provider's perspective in choosing your birth team. So it may be more challenging, right? Because you have to truly find like a healthcare provider that is going to do that, or who's going to support you in a VBAC 2 or a VBAC 3 or whatever VBAC number you're at, right? So that does, as those numbers get bigger, your choice of providers gets smaller, right? So it is possible. It's harder, right? It might be more challenging depending on where you're located and what your options are, right? If you're going into a hospital setting, if you're going to a birth center setting, home birth, whatever. So that may look different, but there is no reason why you should not be able to, if you meet those criteria, to have a VBAC, that you cannot have one just because you've had multiple cesareans. And Christian,
that's like, if you desire it. You got to desire that. If your choice is to have a repeat cesarean, then that's your choice. We want you to be empowered on your decision on what type of birthing experience you desire, because there are going to be some moms who that's their way to birth their babies, and that's totally okay. But for those of you who are like, I want to rethink this and might want to go for that vaginal birth, you have options too. So we just want to know that there's options on both sides and all the way around.
Yeah, exactly. And so what did you see, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but we're talking about mindset a lot. So what have you seen, and I'll share like my own perspective on this too, but for your VBAC 3, right, or anything past VBAC 1, what have you seen be like maybe some of the more challenging mental blocks that some of those mamas have gone through?
I think as far as mindset wise, it's a little bit more difficult because they have experienced that more difficult surgical type of birth and recovery. So it's definitely, it's a tough one. I'm not saying vaginal births aren't hard to recover from either, but the major abdominal surgery just adds a little bit more to it. But getting them over the fact that one, they can do it, their body can do it. Yeah. 2, it's also listening to all the myths that are floating around and all the other bad experiences and, oh my gosh, I tried and I didn't. And I think it's the overall negativity that we could hear. Yeah. And also, if you happen to have a second or third time baby and you're with a healthcare provider and like, oh no, we're just going to schedule your cesarean at 20 weeks, for 38 weeks, it's like, that gets in our minds as well. And it's like, it's that doubt. And when doubt sets in, it really messes with the mindset that it can actually happen. So it's really important to get around the right, like-minded people that'll help support you in that decision. And just basically get the education there for the mom. Yeah. Like, look, this is what it is. This is what's happened. And I think some of the like so-called scare tactics are, if you actually do your research on it, it's very, very low, like less than 1%. Like uterine rupture is a huge one that, yes, it is concerning, no doubt. We don't ever want that to happen to anyone, but it's less than 1%. What about the other 99%? Right? But we focus on that little stuff. It's the little stuff that gets magnified and it's like blows out of proportion and it causes us all fear, and we're like, wait a minute, let's get the facts. What are the statistics?
Yep. And that was one of my biggest fears, honestly, was uterine rupture. And one, knowing if I was eligible. So one of the questions that just came up was, what are the VBAC eligibility criteria? One of the things is that you have a transverse incision. So that means your
On your
incision is
uterus.
on your uterus.
On your
That's
uterus. It's
horizontal.
not the one you see on your belly. It's the one
Yes.
on your uterus. Yep.
So that is something that you have to know from your medical records, because you may not see that on your skin. You won't see it on your skin, right? So you have to go and check your medical records, or share your medical records with your new potential healthcare provider, which will tell you in there. You know, so that's one of the main criterias. And you can look up, if you go, like she said before, VBAC facts or VBAC link, there's a whole list of criteria that you can go through, which will tell you in general if you would be eligible for a VBAC. But and then obviously pre-existing health conditions and those kinds of things too. But one of my biggest fears was uterine rupture. And but just like you said, I had to do my research and figure out, because I had so many family members and people in my own community who were just a little bit fearful. They were more fearful for me than I was for me. And that caused me to be more fearful of the situation. And I'm like, I'm really excited about this. And then I tell y'all, and then you're like, but what about this? And what about that? And I'm like, I mean, so I had to do my own research. And like you said, I learned that uterine rupture, while I was like nervous about it, it's 0.5 to 1% of people actually have uterine rupture. And I think with that being said, like, that's another myth, that uterine rupture, you increase your chance of a uterine rupture, which is not necessarily the case. And with so many other things, I also had to become comfortable with how I chose my healthcare provider, because I decided to go out of hospital for my second birth. And I also had to know that my healthcare provider is going to have my best interests in mind. And that's important when it comes to some of these fear tactics that come upon us, is like, do I trust my healthcare provider? Again, we're going to go into this much more in detail next week, but do I trust my healthcare provider with some of these fears? Have I done my research to overcome some of these fears, to figure out, like, is this even real? Like, should I even be that scared about this situation? And if I am, have I talked to my healthcare provider about it? How are they responding to it? Because the one thing, and this is like what really kind of, I don't know, it's not necessarily birth related, it's like business mindset, right? It's, for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to a birth center. And if I'm thinking logically about this, my birth center is in the business of natural births. They're not in the business of just like pushing people to the limit to try to have natural birth, right? Because if they don't do what they're supposed to do to have healthy and safe deliveries, then that's going to make them look bad. So they're never going to put me in a situation as a patient that's going to make their business look bad. So if they feel at any point that they can no longer support me as their patient, they're going to have to take me and transport me to the hospital, where this is no longer within their control or their locus of control or their expertise. And so that was something for me when it came to like these medical emergencies from a VBAC perspective, that I trusted my healthcare provider enough to know, like, if something is not right, if they know that something is not right and this could make them look bad, they're going to make sure that I'm outside of their care at the minimum, right? That this will be them making sure that I'm safe enough in a medically emergency situation, right? Like, so that I can be taken care of by surgeons or whatever needs to be taken care of. And so I know that that's not necessarily like, oh, that's overcoming fear, but that was just, for me, I had to just think logically about it, where as like all these other little voices who are like in my head, and I'm like, y'all, like, I'm sorry that this is not, you're not fond of this, and I'm sorry, but that was also, you know, I posted about this the other day, like, you might just have to be moved a little bit outside of this circle until I have this baby, because all this negative, worrisome, fearful commentary is not necessary. It's not going to get me closer to like where I'm trying to be. So I think that's also like important when it comes to the mindset piece, is like, you're going to have to truly and honestly, for some of these myths that people are throwing around, like, you're going to have to just remove people or become distant to some people, because it's just going to make going into labor, you're going to, all those little comments that you never even dealt with are
Mm-hmm.
going to show up. And
What I
so,
tell you,
yeah,
you put your blinders
tunnel
on
vision, tunnel
and you
vision.
keep going, and all the others are going to bounce
Yeah.
off of you.
Yeah, it's just so annoying. And I think, for anybody who's on here, like, share this with your family too. Like, share this with your friends and stuff, because sometimes they also need to be educated so that they can best support you. Because there's so many myths that we're not even talking about right now that they are not educated on, so they're just spewing out, like, whatever rumors or things that they've heard that just continues to, like, become the loudest voice when it comes to birth, that it's pushing so many of us further away from doing what our bodies were designed to do. And honestly, like, your choice is your choice. And ultimately, like we've talked about before, we want to just empower you to be able to advocate for yourself for whatever you want and to be educated in the process, even if things don't go as planned. But you have to put yourself in the best possible situation rather than going into this with fear. And there's somebody who said she had a C-section in 2019 and she's due in October, and she is looking to have and find a supportive healthcare provider. So shout out to you. And if you are struggling,
So what are we going to do to help these moms that want VBACs, Chanel?
If you guys, so we have so many exciting things to share.
I know, so exciting.
So many exciting things to share. So how about you share first, because yours is the most, I guess, proximate.
Okay, so tomorrow night, I do free virtual live classes, Partners at Birth. So this is how to get our partners involved with birth, be supportive, what to do, because a lot of times the partners, they just don't know what to do. And their concern is more for the person in labor, is they feel for that person and it's hard to watch them go through the process. Or they have no idea how to be involved in the process and to help. So I teach Partners at Birth tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central, on Facebook and Instagram Live on Serene Life Doula. And I do have a guest speaker. He is going to help me communicate to the partners about how being a 3-time daddy, the difference between his first 2 births and the last birth that was all natural with a much more supportive birth team, and how he was able to be all hands in involved. And he's going to be with me tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time. So that's next week. And then again, me and Chanel will come back next Tuesday and do part 2. And we're going to really help you go through the steps of how to find that VBAC support team, what you need to do to prepare for it, condition for it, and a lot of other good little nuggets that you'll be able to take away and hopefully go out and find your team and your support for your best VBAC possibility. And you?
Yes. And so I'm excited because, y'all, I love talking about VBACs. And so because of that, between just my training and my experience, I have created a VBAC course for you. So starting today, is a pre-sale, so you can purchase it at a discounted rate starting now until April 18th, when I will release the course. So make sure that you go to, all that information is in the link in my bio, but this is all very VBAC specific. So a lot of the things that we're talking about today and next week, but in a lot greater detail, giving you like the nitty gritty and templates and plans and blueprints and all the things that you can really do to help set yourself up for success and give yourself the best possible outcome for your VBAC. So everything that I've done, everything that is truly going to help you put yourself in the best possible situation, and you'll have access to this course forever. So you can always come back to it and refer to it, just because sometimes just going live, you won't be able to see it after we're done. So I wanted to make sure that it was recorded and available for you forever. So that'll be available on April 18th, but you can go ahead and purchase it now at a discounted rate before it goes up. So,
and how many weeks gestation do you think is a good time for them to start getting educated about VBAC?
I mean, personally, when you find out that you're pregnant, you should start
Peeing on a
educating.
stick, right?
Yeah, I think when you found out, when you get that, we don't need to wait. Now, you can wait for, you know, when you hire your birth team and all that. I don't think that, you know, you necessarily need to do that from 3 weeks, but for sure you need to start educating yourself now. And honestly, if you had a C-section and you're not pregnant yet, you still need to educate yourself now, even if you're not pregnant. So
there's things you can be doing now in the
mm-hmm.
interim if you plan to have more children.
Yep. And somebody said, is it ever too late? Is it ever too late to have a VBAC? Is that the question? Let's see. Is it ever too late?
I usually say if you're still pregnant, it's not too late.
Oh yeah, never. I mean, for most of the things that we talk about, it's usually never too late. It's never too late to switch your healthcare provider. It's never too late to educate yourself. It's never too late to hire a doula. It's never too late for any of it. So probably the answer is no. So yes, to get a foul. I don't understand. That must mean VBAC. It's probably autocorrect. Oh, doula. No, never too late. Never too late. Get one now. So that's the other thing. Krisha is a doula in the DFW area. So if you guys are in the DFW area and you're looking for a doula, make sure to reach out to her. I'm a virtual doula. So if you are not in the DFW area, but you want support and you want it to feel like you have a doula in the room with you, but you might have limitations or you can't find one in your area that you're connecting with, hit me up and we can talk. Because I do that.
I always tell them to message me what they want and their zip code. It's easier to search for people and find people within the zip code or kind of the area.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, y'all check us out next week, same time, next Tuesday, and make sure that where can they find your class? How do they get to it? Is it going to be on Instagram Live?
Are you talking about tomorrow night?
Mm-hmm.
Partners at Birth is on Facebook and Instagram Live, Serenity Life Doula.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will put that in the caption. Okay, y'all, have a wonderful night. If you need doulas in Georgia, reach out to Krisha. She is very well connected to find somebody in person, okay?
Yeah.
All right, bye, y'all.
Good night.